YouTube, Rook here from Rook Geek Goodness, my little channel web for all things geeky and cool, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Welcome back to another action figure and unboxing video. I'm super stoked to bring this video to you, to all my viewers and subscribers. I've been sitting on my hands waiting to do this video, basically to get the right approach and tell the right story with this particular figure, as well as getting a brand new turntable, which I'll be showcasing off in this video. I needed something a little bit larger, especially for a box like this. So what are we talking about in this unboxing and action figure review? We're talking about the Pulse, the Hasbro Pulse Store exclusive from the Forgotten Realms Dungeons & Dragons set. It's a figure that I've been hoping and really want to get my hands on. I was hoping that they would make one of these because back in the day, there weren't any action figures for Dungeons & Dragons properties as far as the newer sort of characters would go. They made it based on the old properties back in, let's say, the late 80s, based on the old Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, which is kind of where the figures came from at one particular time. But this is something brand new, and Drizzt kind of blew up in the last year or so. We had a set of Funko Pops with both Drizzt and Guenhwyvar. We had a Drizzt statue recently, and now we have this really awesome action figure from Hasbro Pulse Store as it being an exclusive. It's a 2-pack featuring, of course, Drizzt and Guenhwyvar, his faithful companion. Now, if you're not familiar with the character of Drizzt, he was created back in 1988 by an author by the name of R.A.Salvatore in a book called The Crystal Shard, which I'll put a picture up so you can see the cover art, what it looks like. That was when he really debuted, his first appearance, if you will, in that particular story, and he became a fan favorite, just an iconic character of a renegade dark elf from the Drow community, which were basically dark elves were Drow that are considered quote-unquote bad guys. They were evil, and he was the only good Drow that was known from. He is, of course, a ranger, which will be kind of showcased a little bit in this video. But we're looking first, right now, we're going right into the breakdown segment. I want to go fast and furious right in breakdown. Again, I want to thank all my viewers and subscribers. If someone new, never watched any of my content before, please give this video a like at the bottom of the page and click that subscribe button, which picture my face, or the 8-bit icon in the corner. That will really help the channel grow, as well as sending this content across the YouTube platform for other people can watch this video. Now, again, we're in the breakdown segment. We're completely bypassing the introduction. I kind of merged them together. And, of course, the very first thing we do in a breakdown segment is look at the packaging and presentation. The packaging is a little bit different for this particular box because it features a slipcase design. So first, let's take a look at the packaging here. It's really weird. It's really weird the design they took on this particular box. It is kind of embossed with some silver inlay, so it may come across really weird on camera, as well as the lights picking up weird sort of shadows on it, but that's kind of the way this packaging looks. It's a really cool shot of Drizzt and Guenhwyvar, his faithful companion. Again, this is a 2-pack. It looks really good. The side of it here, it's unimpressive. There's more embossing on this side. The back of the packaging, it may be hard to pick up, but it's the actual back of the physical package when we take it off in a second. It's an embossed picture. Sort of, you might see it might be hard to pick up here. It's Drizzt finding the ice dragon called Icing Death, which is the namesake for one of his scimitar swords. So we'll talk about that shortly. So let's get this thing out of the slipcase so we can go on with the the juicy goodness, a juicy nugget in the center here of what you get for this particular package. Again, this is a 2-pack. Price point was $40 from the Hasbro Pulse store. That's the only way you could get it, through Hasbro Pulse or through maybe a third party. In this case, maybe eBay would be a way you could do it. Of course, at the top right here, we have Forgotten Realms, which is where the character takes place, where his home is basically, is in Forgotten Realms, where the main D&D campaign is all about. You have the figure right here on the inside. You have an extra head he comes with. He comes with his 2 swords, both Twinkle and Icing Death. You get a cool necklace right there. You get some cool flame effects or energy effects that you can attach to the blade. The all-important Guenhwyvar figure right here. You get this massive D20 and a pair of interchangeable hands, as well as a necklace, which I didn't talk about there. And if you come up to the back side here, again, this side shows nothing important. This side over here, again, nothing important. But the back of the packaging is some really cool artwork, which is him fighting the Icing Death Dragon. It's very similar, again, to this one, which I'll showcase again right here. So you have the same imprint right here. This is the full color version. This is this version right here. And I think, just take a little segue real quick, I think the reason why we're seeing a lot of Drizzt merchandise showing up, especially this figure here, coming from the Hasbro Pulse store, is because there's a video game that is going to be dropping shortly called Dark Alliance I think it comes out for PS4 and the Xbox One. I don't think it's going to be for the new next-gen systems, but I think that's one of the reasons why they wanted to push this figure to market so quickly, because of that video game coming out and people really wanting a Drizzt figure very, very badly, myself included. I've wanted this figure for a very, very, very long time, and this is hopefully the first in a long run of figures that will be coming out for Forgotten Realms based on the Dungeons & Dragons property. Again, this is housed by Wizards of the Coast. So I'm really, really hoping we get more figures based on the Company of the Hall, rather the Companions of the Hall, so that's their group. Of course, that'd be Brunor, Canterbury, Wulfgar, and Regis. Those are the main 4 characters that were part of the Drizzt sort of novels, and Salvatore has put out a ton of books for this particular character. So with that being said, enough of me running my mouth. Let's get this guy out of packaging. Alright guys, we have our Drizzt Sword and Guenhwyvar figures out of packaging. The next thing we do, we take our figures out of packaging, is look at the paint and articulation. I've been messing around with these figures for a few minutes before I started shooting some video, and there's some glaring problems with this figure, specifically with the Drizzt figure itself. But before I get and kind of nitpick some pieces, I want to show you the kind of the insert backdrop they give you here. It's a cardboard insert. It looks pretty cool. It features what looks like the 10 towns, the location where Drizzt is kind of not where he's heralded from, but where he stays. He comes from a town underground called Menzoberranzan. That's his actual home. That's where he was born. But this looks to be the 10 towns, which is a backdrop for the place where all the actions and encounters usually took place in the Drizzt novels in the very first set of books. It was the 10 towns. So this is kind of a cool little insert backdrop. You can put this with your figure if you want to kind of have him go through a snowy setting, because the 10 towns were near a bunch of mountains in the D&D campaigns, really, really far away from the beaten path, nowhere near the really populated cities like Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter or even Waterdeep, some of the big towns in the Forgotten Realms setting. But let's take a look at these figures here, because there's a lot going on. I want to first focus on the Guenhwyvar figure, then we'll focus on Drizzt here. I'll put him off here, and we'll focus on Guenhwyvar first. This is his faithful cat companion, or a panther rather, that is summoned with an extra accessory, which we'll showcase off right now, the figurine of wondrous powers. This little cat statue, it looks like a little panther statue that Drizzt has, that basically, from this, he calls forth this panther. This is a full-grown panther as far as scale would go, but he comes from, or rather she comes from, I think it's a she, that's what they term her as she in the books. So it's summoned from this particular accessory, which Drizzt can hold in one of his hand accessories, which I'll showcase that shortly, but this is kind of how it comes from what they call the astral plane. It comes with a bunch of smoke, and it comes into prime material plane like this particular cat you see here. So Guenhwyvar here is a really cool panther, highly articulated. There's a lot of articulation all over this figure. The tail needs to be plugged in, but there is articulation. There is a joint. There's a swivel joint here. You can spin it 360, and you have up and down movement. It has a basically almost every part of this cat can articulate. The neck can spin 360. The head can go up and down. There's an articulated jaw. I love that face sculpt. Looks just like how I envisioned Guenhwyvar from the books to look. Great head sculpt. Again, this will spin 360 as well. Great articulation right there. There's a cut right here, so you can spin even the torso 360. It's a little bit weird. The legs will click a little bit. You have clicking joints here, so you have movement here. You have articulation here, as well as the paws can go up and down. So you have up articulation on the paws, down articulation on the paws. The legs can go forward and backward. So you get a large amount of articulation with this cat figure, with the Guenhwyvar cat. It is highly posable. I like the detail. Let's take a look at the paint real quick here. The paint you can see looks like fur. They're giving it to mimic fur without making the toy itself fluffy or flocked. So it looks really, really good. It kind of jumped the gun. It got past articulation. Should have talked about the paint first, but it looks really, really good. Again, the head sculpt really screams, Guenhwyvar to me. Great interpretation of the cat for Drizzt here. Now let's talk about Drizzt himself. We'll talk about Drizzt and we'll talk about the accessories. There's a lot of cool things with Drizzt here, and there's one glaring problem, and you can see me struggling already, is I can barely get this figure to stand. There are peg points in the feet, so you can put him on a figure stand. But why would you need a figure stand at all for a character in the, let's say, 6-inch scale? I don't know why they can't make this character stand. I think there's just too much weight on the back with his cloak, and we'll talk about that shortly. Let's break down this figure. That head sculpt, this is what he comes pre-packed with. He comes with an additional head sculpt, which we'll talk about that shortly, because the second, what they call, not really called, they're head sculpts, but they're actually called portraits. That's the correct terminology to use. These are portraits. You can hot swap the faces, so I can take this face here off of this one and put it with this crazy hair, and take this open mouth and put it on this one instead. I'm probably going to display him with this head sculpt as opposed to this one. I'm not a big fan of that one, but as far as the detail and the deco, dead on the money, looks really, really good. I like the green cloak because he does have a green cloak in the books. It's sort of ruffled, and he has a hood, but it's been pulled back to basically so you can see his face. That's the idea. So the hood does not articulate. It is sculpted in position. Love the way it looks. The armor itself looks just awesome. The kind of like this light blue, a dark blue sheen with this gold trim looks really, really good. I'll put his arms up so you can get a better look at just the paint apps alone, and the detail and the deco look really, really good. I don't have a problem with the way this figure looks. I have a problem with the figure standing. It just has issues standing is my main concern that I see here. But I love the attention to the detail, the plates, the segmented plates to make it look like its armor looks really, really good. I love the way it looks here. Now, if you spin the figure back, I'm going to take the cape up. He has a pair of sheaths that dangle from behind that are basically hanging from a strap. These are functional sheaths. You can put his scimitars in these sheaths. They do in fact work. A little bit weird because usually sheaths are on the side, like here, not kind of dangling from behind. A little bit weird to me, but he does have buckles and straps all across the torso of the figure. That looks really, really good. If you're going to ask, can you remove his cloak? You in fact can. You have to take off the head sculpt, which I'll do for you right now. It just basically fits onto the ball joint, and you just slip it right off, and you can plug the head right back into position, which is pretty cool. And you can see without that cloak, he loses a little bit of his mass just because of the way this cloak looks on him. The figure looks a little bit thinner, and that's kind of okay because Drizzt is known to be a small figure. He is a dark elf. He is a drow, and drows are not normally known to be tall. And again, you see me struggling to try to make him stand just because I don't know why this figure has so much difficulty trying to stand. It's kind of, I don't really understand why. It doesn't really make sense to me. But great figure as far as the deco, the look of him, the feel. Looks really, really good. I love what Hasbro did with this particular figure. I wanted a Drizzt figure for so long, you guys don't know. But the main issue, again, I have is not necessarily the paint job or the deco, is it has a lot of difficulty trying to stand without let's say a figure stand, which you really wouldn't think a figure like this would need a figure stand. I don't get why they did that. He does look really, really good. So these leather straps go across his chest, the crisscross, and they come across his back as well. So it looks really, really good. Let's focus now on articulation because that's important with this sort of figure. There's a lot of articulation here. Some of it gets a little bit hindered by the cloak, but I'll do the articulation first here, and then we'll put the cloak back on. So head articulation up and down, 360 will spin with no hindrance. Arms can go out almost to a T. The reason why they don't is this plate slides up but doesn't give you full range of motion. It goes about here and it comes close to here. I don't want to go too high. I don't want to rip the pauldron off the shoulder. He does have 360 on the arm. He does have a double jointed elbow right here. It looks pretty pegless almost. Yeah, it looks like a pegless elbow joint. His wrists will spin 360 with no hindrance. Again, great deco on the forearm. I love the way that looks. Coming down to the chest, he does have a ab crunch, so he can go forward about that far. So he has a great range of motion right here. He does not have a swivel joint as like you normally would see for a figure where you can spin the figure 360 this way at this joint. They did not put that joint in here. He has this butterfly joint, so he goes forwards, again forwards and backwards, but there's no joint here that will allow me to spin the figure 360, mainly probably because I'm guessing this leather piece might have hindered that articulation. That's maybe why they didn't put it in, I'm guessing. I messed around with the articulation earlier with the legs just off camera, and he has a silly amount of articulation. He doesn't look like he has it right here, but when you start bending the joints, it really showcases it. You can get a knee joint bend here, then you can push the leg back that far. That's a really sick amount of articulation. You can see how far back this double jointed knee will really move, and it is again a pinless joint, so you can't see where the joint would break. So it gives it hides the joint better, like a normal knee would look. That's the idea. So you have this joint here with the legs. It does float. I'll kind of showcase that joint right there so you can see it. The lower portions of the leg, the whole piece swivels here. So there's no thigh swivel cut here that breaks from this leg down. So it's all one solid piece, basically, is what I'm getting at. The foot articulation, he does spin 360, it looks like. Yeah, 360 with no problem there. You do get the weird cut here on either side of the calf. Just be aware of that. Now let's put the cloak back on so you can see where I'm coming from. When you put the cloak back on, it does feel like it hinders a tiny bit of the articulation just because how bulky the cloak really is. It doesn't hinder it a whole lot, just somewhat. So the head goes back on. So again, the look changes dramatically when you put the cloak back on the figure. The arms can go back up around. You get clipped by the top of the furls of the cloak. So you gotta kind of push through it. Just be wary of that. And then you get all the other articulation that we talked about before. So the hindrance point would be the top of the cloak is where it cuts into that shoulder. That's where it hinders the most. But adding this cloak to the back here of the figure gives him a lot more back weight, which I'm thinking where the problem is. One thing I didn't talk about for the cloak is the wash. They have a lot of cool deco, and the paint app on the cloak looks really, really good. They did a really good job on that paint app. I'm really, really happy with that paint app. Now let's swap the head, and I can show you what it looks like with the other head, the default version, without swapping the face. So this is probably the one I would wind up using, just because I think it looks a lot better, my personal opinion, with the other head sculpt on. Again, I think it looks a little bit better than this one. I'm not a fan of this one. Again, you can take the face off of this one and put it with this sort of windswept hair. If you want to go that direction, you can do it. What you do is you literally just pull the head literally right off, and it would look like this. So what it has is a point on the front, on the top right here, and a point in the back that would clip into these points inside the hair. That's the idea. So all you simply do is you just put it in, and you would feel it, literally you would feel it give, and you know you're solid and you're in. And you're in. That's all you would do to put it in place. So if you wanted to swap it, you in fact can do that with this particular head sculpt if you want to do that. I'm going to leave it with this one alone. I think it's, again, a better head sculpt in my personal opinion. Now let's focus on the accessories, because that's kind of important here. First things first, again, we talked about the Onyx figurine right here, the Guenhwyvar figurine. I'll get up-close shots of all the accessories so you can see what they look like. This is kind of a shiny plastic. I always thought it would be a little different in the books, the way I always thought it was described. I thought it would be a longer cat, like he's on all fours, not sort of like all fours like he's perched. I thought it would be different than this one. Maybe I interpreted what I was reading differently than what the actual real figurine Wondrous Power is. But it's tiny. My only concern with these sort of things is they can get lost very, very easily. So there are several accessories with this figure, so you definitely want to make sure if you have these things loose, put them in a baggie so you can put them next to the figure. You don't want to lose all your parts, so just be wary of that. He does come with two interchangeable hands. He comes with a open sort of grip on this hand, which would be I guess, left hand, and he has a closed fist on this one. So these are swappable. So if this would be his left hand, you just simply pop it off. You pop the joint right here. It is a simple peg point joint right there. And you would pop this into position right here, right there. Perfect, pops right in. And he just has this sort of clawed hand. I don't know, maybe he would try to hold the statue with it. I'm not quite sure why he has a clawed hand. It doesn't really make sense to me why his grip is like this. I mean, you could probably pry the hands open a little bit to put the statue in a little tighter, but maybe that's the reason for this particular hand. I'll go back to the other one real quick here. There are some problems with these hands, which we'll talk about that momentarily. And of course, the fist can be plugged in, which most likely would be the other hand, right here. Again, these are just simply peg posts. You just simply plug them right in, and you're good to go. Again, why would you want to have a closed fist? You can't do anything with his weapons, so I don't know why they'd give us a closed fist. Kind of odd, but the look would look something like this. So yeah, I don't, again, go figure why they would go that particular direction is beyond me. I don't know why they would go that road. But there are, again, we'll talk about them shortly, why there's issues, I believe, with these hands. Next thing we'll talk about are, or actually rather, we'll talk about this necklace first. He comes with this necklace, and it has a symbol of a little unicorn. It might be hard to notice here on camera. I'll take an up-close shot of it here. Hopefully you can see it. It is a little unicorn, a unicorn pendant. A lot of people who have reviewed this figure have not talked about what that is, because people don't know, because they don't read the books. That is it comes from the goddess Meliki. It's the god of rangers for D&D. So you can put that necklace on Drizzt here. It kind of really gets lost, in my personal opinion, if you use the cloak. If you have it set like this, you kind of get lost, the pendant kind of gets lost with the figure, just because there's a lot going on here. If you take off the cloak though, so let's do that real quick so you can see what that would look like. So if I remove the cloak, put the necklace on, and then put the head back on the character, you can see it a lot better right here. So he does have it there, so it looks a little more, you can see it better through the cape, or through the cloak rather, in this sort of orientation. I don't know if I'm going to have mine sporting this particular accessory. I'm not a fan of it per se. I like Drizzt with the cloak. I like to have it as uncluttered as I possibly can. Now let's focus on the weapons that Drizzt has. He has two different swords he comes with. I did a statue review, and unfortunately I said some wrong information, and I have corrected it in the text box of my statue review for Drizzt. I thought the statues were reversed, meaning I thought the different blades were named differently. And I'm going to give you the correct information now of what each sword is named and their abilities. The first sword here is the sword called Twinkle. It's this one right here, this sort of rust-colored blade. It has a blue jewel in the hilt. That is the Twinkle sword. What they call a sword of defense, or a defender blade. This is a scimitar, although it doesn't look like a scimitar. It looks more like a long sword as opposed to a traditional scimitar, which is much more curved than this blade. But that's sort of liberty they've taken by Forgotten Realms and Wizards of the Coast, and R.A.Salvatore has taken a lot of creative liberty to make these, they call them, again, scimitars, but they're not scimitars, they're more like long swords. And of course, one thing about Twinkle here is that it warns of danger. That's what Twinkle does. This other one is blue blade with sort of brown hilt and a blue on top, and sort of this, it's supposed to be, I think it's a cat right there on the hilt, or the pommel right there. This is what they call Icing Death. This is this scimitar. It's named after the white dragon that Drizzt slayed with Wulfgar. He plundered this from the dragon horde, and this is what they call a frost brand. A frost brand sword is basically an ice blade that would basically give off frost. It gives the wielder immunity to fire. You can put out fires, like walls of fire, if you plunge the blade inside of it. That's the idea of this blade. So Drizzt can do a couple cool things with these blades. First and foremost, let's take his head off again and go back to a small and easier way to showcase this functionality off. You can sheath the blades, as I mentioned before. The blades can be stored in the scabbards, usually with no problem. We put them in the right way, that would help. So it doesn't, I don't really think it matters which way which scabbard goes in which blade. Normally I believe he wielded his left hand, I think it's this hand, is Twinkle, and I think this one is Icing Death, if I remember correctly. So you can, in fact, let me put his head back on here, store the blades like this. So you can hold the blades on his character, on his figure, without losing them. I like that. Again, the blades store a little bit differently. I move the arms up so you can see what I'm talking about here, because they dangle from the back, not from traditionally from sides. Normally you would see a blade over here, like it'd be back this way, where you can draw it. And I'll showcase it this way so you can see. Normally you would draw a blade here. These blades dangle literally from the back of his hips. So a little bit different positioning of how you normally would draw blades as opposed to what we've seen in both fantasy and real world uses of weapons before. So that's how you can store the weapons. Another thing you can do with weapons, they come with two different effects that can be attached to the blades. There are these big, heavy, solid plastic flame effects that can be attached to the blades. I'll showcase them off for you right now so you can see what they look like. Again, I'll take up-close shots of all this so you can see them. And the only problem I have by using this really cool flame effect is that it adds a significant amount of weight to the weapons. It looks cool. Don't get me wrong. It looks really cool. Love the way they look. But it adds so much more weight to these weapons that Drizzt can barely hold the weapons. So let's talk about that now. Let's put his head back on. There's a lot of this head on, head off stuff. So just so you can see fundamentally how the figure works. That's my goal here. So I'm putting his head back on here. And let's take a look at the blades in his hands. But before I do that, the grip of the hands were very, very tight when I brought them out of package. I had to pry these hands open just to get the blades to fit in them. Why? I don't know. And I'm hoping I didn't damage the plastic in the process. So let's try to put this one in his hand, like that, and this one in his hand. Again, you have to pry the hand open, which again, I don't understand the reasoning of why they made the hands so tight that you can't put the weapons in his hands. That to me doesn't make any sense. And then you can get something like this. You get this cool little, you know, he's got his weapons up, they're on fire, or they're going through the air. Again, here's the big problem. They add so much weight, they cause the figure to dangle. I was hoping that the blades here would give him enough front weight to basically counterbalance the back weight of the figure. Now, it could be just, I'm just bad at posing figures. It could be just all me, guys, 100%. If you have this Drizzt figure, please let me know in the comments. Or do you have this issue as well? Do you struggle with trying to pose this figure? Please let me know in the comments. But again, looks really good with the blade effects. We'll take the blade effects off so you can see what it looks like without these crazy blade effects. I think it's cool. I'm not sold if I'm going to use them or not, but I do like the way they look. Without the blade effects, it just looks a lot, I mean, it looks a lot cleaner without the blade effects, and I like it. I do think it looks really, really cool. I think it's a neat figure. Definitely something you can, well worth putting your money down for. Now let's focus on one of the two last set of accessories. You get this really cool D20. It's a sparkly kind of green die. It's very, very large. Compared to your typical D20, much smaller. But really cool D20 die. They give you this with this set. I think that's the only way to get this die, the way it looks, the size of this die, is in this bundle. So that's it there. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at something I think they kind of failed on, meaning Wizards of the Coast, and of course D&D and Wizards of the Coast as a property, were these handouts. They have these really cool kind of handouts that came with I'm guessing it's Dark Elf script on the back. I don't know the language. This is, of course, that looked to be a frost giant right here. This was a beholder right here with some text on the back. You have here, it looks like a knoll. Yeah, it's a knoll right there on the back. Some more text. You have here some goblins. Again, more text on the back. And this guy right here, I'm not quite sure who he is. He looks really, really cool. Again, more Dark Elf script. I'm assuming it's Dark Elf script on the back. He's probably some type of Underdark creature, that's what I'm guessing at. And the last one we have here is looks to be probably a white dragon. This might be Icing Death himself here. It looks really, really good. The biggest problem I have with this stuff here is not that they included it, but they put it on this flimsy paper. I would expect this to have been maybe like a cardstock, something a bit stronger. I can really see this being used as a visual aid, specifically in Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. I think you can repurpose this stuff here and make it really cool for a D&D campaign. But why they gave it this, flimsy, like paper, I don't get it. They should have spent more money, maybe even given the cost to the user here, and gotten rid of maybe the die and given us better cardstock. I think it would have been a much better idea than the flimsy paper we have here. So that being said, guys, putting Guenhwyvar back in the shot here, I think this is a really cool figure. I do have my concerns, again, with him standing, the cloak sometimes gets in the way of his head. Doesn't look like it snaps in tight all the time. Having these super heavy weapon effects, just I don't know. They're really cool, but there's so much weight with this plastic that it causes his arms to not be able to hold his weapons very well. So to me, I think that's a big problem to me. And as you see before, he keeps falling over. Again, another problem, I've mentioned it. I'll kind of lean him against Guenhwyvar here so he stands up. But that's the biggest problem I have. He doesn't stand still, and I think even adding these heavy weapon effects to him is going to be a problem as well. So with that being said, let's go to final thoughts and wrap up this video. Alright guys, final thoughts on the Forgotten Realms Dungeons & Dragons Hasbro Pulse Store exclusive Drizzt, Doradin, and Guenhwyvar 2-pack. Love these figures, thought they did an excellent job for these figures. There are problems, as I mentioned in the breakdown segment. The figure not able to really stand by himself without a figure stand, or maybe in this case using Guenhwyvar as a sort of backstop, is a problem to me. The weapons look really, really cool. Love the way they look. You get a lot of accessories packed into this particular box. The $40 is well worth it. You do get that cool backdrop, as I mentioned before, of the 10 towns, the setting of basically the first set of Forgotten Realm books for Drizzt and the Icewind Dale trilogy. You can use this backdrop if it looks as a diorama sort of setting. If you want to go that road, you can, but you don't have to if you don't want to go that direction. The flame effects, as I mentioned before, are really, really cool, but exceptionally heavy. They add a lot more weight to the figure. His arms can't even really hold the figure aloft. Of course, we talked about Guenhwyvar a little bit. Great cat figure here. Great amount of articulation. Love the way she looks. She really stole the show, in my personal opinion. I think she was way better than the Drizzt figure as far as the composition and the execution. I think the cat was much better put together than Drizzt here, especially the cape. I think this might have been good if it was maybe a soft goods. I think that might have been a better approach to take, just because the hard plastic gives you so much more weight on the back. That is an issue. I do like the idea that he does come with an extra portrait, an extra face sculpt here. You can use this if you want to. That really massive D20 that we talked about is really, really cool. The tiny little statue of Guenhwyvar that you basically summon the Panther from the astral plane with this is really, really cool. Having the additional hands right here, I don't think are needed. I think that was a waste. They could have used that money and repurposed it for something better. The necklace, same deal. I don't think he really needed the necklace. And of course, last but not least, were these pictures, which I really think they could have done something more with these particular pictures. I don't think they're really great as far as the artwork looks really good. Don't get me wrong, guys. The artwork looks phenomenal, but they're on just paper. They're laminated pieces of paper, which in my personal opinion can get lost, it can get torn. Having it on cardstock, I think would have been a better approach to take. Why they didn't go that road, I don't know. But all things considered, is it worth your money? Is it worth $40 to buy it? I think so. I really think so. You get a lot of value out of this set. Again, the figure, the cat, all the accessories. This included pieces of paper here, the backdrop. I think you get your money's worth for $40. I wouldn't spend anything more than $40 for this two-piece set. I believe you can still get it through the Hasbro Pulse store if you're a fan of Drizzt. You may not even know this has come out. It is only sold there unless you can find it on eBay. Scalpers are probably going to flip it, charge you a higher premium. Check the Hasbro Pulse store first to see if you can get your hands on it. But all things considered, I really like this figure set. I think it's really, really good. And with that being said, I do hope you like my video review of Drizzt and Guenhwyvar 2-pack, the Hasbro Pulse store exclusives. Remember to click that like button bottom page, click that subscribe button, picture my face. When you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, kind of be notified of my latest videos. Of course, last but not least, you can click windows over here to watch my content. Take care, guys. See you next video, and bye-bye.